Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On the Mic with Mike, the premier business radio program. I'm your host, Mike King. I appreciate you being here with me. We're coming to you from the Mike King Studio, which is the global epicenter of social enterprise business. Hey, we looked up, there's a lot of exciting things happening in the sports landscape, in football too. But really the big thing that's out there, what the buzz is, we got my man Jeff here. We got Jeff Lewis from American Flag Football. Welcome back to the program, sir.
Great to be back, Mike. Nice to talk to you again.
All righty, like I said before we started, some people were talking to me about that if the NFL kept putting the rules in place, that people were going to be playing flag football, and look up what happened at the Pro Bowl. They're playing your sport, sir.
Yep.
There you go. Really quick.
And you know what? They look like they were having a lot more fun than they did when they were playing in the Pro Bowl the last few years. That's for sure.
Really quickly, tell folks who you are and what you do.
I'm the CEO and founder of the American Flag Football League, the first professional flag football organization in the world. We have played tournaments for men and women, global tournaments, and we'll be launching a men's professional league in 2024, and we'll be launching a women's professional league in 2025.
Really quickly, so you touched on the Pro Bowl. The NFL got rid of the Pro Bowl because there was no energy, no excitement there. Like you just said, there was clearly excitement playing flag football.
Well, players are, pro athletes are competitors first, right? They're the thing that they live for is to taste the competition and and to be sort of tested, right, by somebody at their level, and see how they come out. And so if you had the chance to sort of follow an NFL player around for the whole year, you would find him engaged in all sorts of really highly competitive activity, some of which might be a pickup basketball game, some of which might be showing up at a high school field in his town in the springtime, where all of a sudden he and a few other guys start just playing touch football and just absolutely grinding to try to outdo the other. There are these things that kids do, these one-on-ones, right, where you play. You have a quarterback and you take turns being the receiver, being the defender. You'd see these guys doing this all the time, in a very intense way. So the reason they didn't compete hard in the Pro Bowl had nothing to do with their character or their internal competitiveness or their drive. It had everything to do with them being smart, which was that the percent probability of me getting hurt for no real gain suggests that I probably shouldn't engage too physically in a tackle football game that's not going to make a difference for me. So it wasn't that they don't love to play football, and it wasn't that they don't love to compete, and it wasn't that they're not, people who want to put on a good show for fans. It was that the risk for them of playing hard in a tackle game that doesn't count is significant. If you look, there's a lot of conversation right now about the World Baseball Classic, where Altuve got hurt, and the Mets closer Edwin Diaz got hurt, and their teams are going to be pretty significantly affected. Those are big losses from basically a series of exhibition games, and a lot of the best players in the world chose not to participate. They wanted to represent their country. That was in their hearts, but many of them thought that the math just suggested that it would be a terrible waste from the standpoint of their career and their ability to help their teams, which is their main job, that they might get hurt playing in something that ultimately didn't really do much for them. So, I thought it was a great event, and, baseball, obviously, you're a lot less likely to get hurt than you are playing football. But you could even see, again, it was a rational decision for the guys not to play, who didn't play, because some really important players did get hurt and now are not available to their teams.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Lewis, American Flag Football League, is here with us. So we were back together, about a year and a half ago. Let's talk about some of the changes where you guys are now. Where are we now moving forward? What have you guys done in the last 18 months new and exciting?
So the most important thing is that we've really committed to having a much more conventional, traditional structure where we have teams in cities. They represent those cities. The players come from those cities. and they're really part of those communities. Our point of view is that the traveling circus model that we've been using is very difficult in team sports. That a big part of team sports is who are we and who are they, just that sort of tribalism. And it's hard to really make somebody into your tribe because of a story about them. A lot of tribalism is really driven by geography. I had the chance to go to my first English Premier League soccer game in about 40 years last weekend. I went to Arsenal to watch them play Crystal Palace. And directly below where we were sitting, there were two groups of supporters of each of the teams. Now, soccer is a pretty tame game in terms of physicality. Yet I have never seen the kind of sort of warlike tribalism going on between these two groups of supporters for the big bad wolf Arsenal guys who are top of the table, and this poor little Crystal Palace team that really didn't have much of a chance. But they never stopped chanting and singing and looking at each other and roaring with this unbelievable intensity. And that's just because it'd be easy for people who live near where Crystal Palace plays to say, you know what, let's pick a better team because our team's not too good. But people don't do that because they kind of want their team to represent them. So, and actually, I think we almost look down on people that are kind of fair weather fans, right? That are, Seahawks fans when they win the Super Bowl, and then the next year they're Patriots fans when they win the Super Bowl, and then the next year they're Chiefs fans when they win the Super Bowl. There's something we love about the suffering Jets fan.
I'm from Philadelphia, so you can imagine. You can imagine where I'm just getting over not just the Super Bowl. I'm getting over the World Series as well.
Yeah, you guys had a rough year, no question about it. And frankly, the way the NFL works these days, with the way that they do scheduling, the way that they do contracts, the windows tend to be pretty short. So you really do feel like when you get that team that kind of where everything has come together, where you have all those parts, that you want to take advantage of those moments because you just don't know when they're going to come again. You look at how good the Seahawks were. They basically got two bites at the apple when they had that great team, but it's been very hard for them to replicate it. You look at really how diminished the Patriots are, and you could see that, one of the most important elements in the NFL is you either have to have one of the 3 or 4 best, like those real marquee trophy quarterbacks. And if you don't, your quarterback has to be on his rookie deal. Because the only way you have enough money to surround your quarterback with good weapons and good defenders is if your quarterback's on the rookie deal. Because once you have to go to market on the quarterback, your options get really, really limited in terms of what the rest of your team looks like. So the Eagles were in that great magic moment there where they had certainly an above average quarterback who was still on a rookie deal. So from a sort of financial perspective, he was an unbelievable value. But that gave them the kind of flexibility to have like an AJ Brown, who was such a meaningful player for them. Once you miss that window, once you get to where you're going to have to start paying that quarterback, once you make it to the final game and all your coordinators get hired as head coaches, there's all kinds of challenges in the NFL to kind of sustain. And the NFL, in a lot of ways, is purposefully built so that it is difficult to sustain with the way the draft works, with the way the schedule works, because they don't want teams to be at the bottom, kind of forever. You look at how quickly the Bengals went from being pretty bad to being pretty good. That's the great thing about the sport, that you can kind of feel like, maybe my team's not hopeless. I mean, the Giants really, basically 1 year went from being kind of a joke to giving a lot of hope.
There you go, Jeff Lewis, American Flag Football. So let's go back and talk about, we talked before, you said the popularity of flag football.
Yeah.
And so where we are now, and you said everybody's played flag or touch football.
Right. I mean, Mike, I always say that football without pads is America's pastime. Nobody gets up on Thanksgiving morning to play baseball. Nobody goes to the beach with a glove and a bat, and says, let's have a pickup baseball game. At recess, generally speaking, we don't start playing baseball. We just pick up a football and off we go. If you think about it, the only football that's played with pads and helmets is played on Saturdays and Sundays by guys who don't play football the rest of the week. they play our version of football the rest of the week. You go to an NFL practice, they're playing 7-on-7. They're not hitting. You go to college teams, a lot of conferences in college, you won't even see any hitting at all other than during game days. So football really is the version of football that we celebrate at the professional level is this, in a way, very unusual thing compared to what the rest of us do and how we engage with football. And I think that you were talking before about the rules. I think the NFL has got some real issues with the quality of their product, because once you stop practicing, people, it seems now to take 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, because teams don't hit in practice, is for them to actually figure out how to play the game before the teams really sort of coalesce. And then you've got all these rules that are almost impossible for the players to abide by. They're being put in a position where they have to really think too much, and that really undercuts the product. When you watch these situations where a guy's about to hit somebody and then he sort of hesitates because you can see he's thinking about, am I allowed to do this? There was a time when the game had this beautiful athleticism and flow because they just played, and I think they're sort of squashing that. And it's not, you go back and watch a 10-year-old playoff game on YouTube and watch the way the game flows. It doesn't appear to me to be a lot more dangerous or less dangerous today versus then, but it sure doesn't look like as good of a product. It looks like the product is deteriorating.
One of the things that we looked at the end of the Super Bowl, Eagles got flagged for a penalty, and everyone in the world was saying, we got robbed, except for the player who said, yeah, I did it.
Right.
And sometimes you look at, even though I talked about NFL guys, Ken Oxendine and Deion Fox, they talk about business decisions. Like you said, the guy has to make a business decision. Am I going to hit him? And you can sort of see it in real time.
Yep. And the best things that we watch are athletes sort of just connected to their pure capability. We watch people just in full flight, just doing their thing. And people who are hesitating don't make for great heroes. and I think that's what you're starting to see a lot of. You're starting to see this kind of uncertainty that players have really about what the rules really are and what they can and can't do. And many of them will tell you that when they get flagged for something inappropriate, that it was not inappropriate, and that essentially something just changed infinitesimally about where the other player was. That basically when they committed to the hit versus where they thought the guy was going to be in terms of his position and his body position, and then where he sort of ended up being. And it's kind of like, what they can't really win. So it's a very difficult thing. I think it's getting worse. And I think that again, you have this problem that they don't practice. So the early part of the season is ugly. The early part of the season.
Lewis American Flag Football. So now, you said 2024 going live. Mm-hmm. Can you say what cities that you're going to be in?
So the first three are Dallas, Vegas, and Boston. I think we have some very interesting possibilities for the fourth. And what we really love about these teams is they're really going to represent their community in a way that's like kind of a throwback. We're going to be paying guys to play, and they'll be able to make decent money, but they're not going to be making enough money to move from Seattle to Boston to become a professional flag player, not in year one. So the team is going to be built from people who are in the community. So when you look at like a Boston team, you'll have a couple of guys that played for the Pats and settled down in the area. I'll have a couple of guys that played for BC who settled in the area. And you'll find some guy who's a legend because he won the state championship in Massachusetts, 10 years ago and tore his Achilles and then never played in college. You'll get all these people that already have, a strong connection into the community. And when they go out there to represent you, there'll be a different feeling. They'll feel like they're your guys. They'll feel like they're, that it's like old school stuff where, people represented where they were. If you go back a ways, the way that like we fell in love with college sports is people just went to college and then they made a team and then the teams played each other and there was this really intense rivalry. because first you cared a lot about the school that you went to, and then second you decided to go play the guys from the other school. It wasn't like, nowadays where we basically hire professional athletes to put the uniforms on of colleges, and
Yeah,
they end
so
up
which
not
day will you guys
being,
play on?
sorry,
Which day will you guys play on?
what day will we play?
Yes.
So we're going to play Saturday and Sunday. We're going to play double headers on Saturday and Sunday. And the nature of our game is you could kind of play it as often as you play basketball, given the kind of contact and the kind of the run that the game represents. So our intention is to, at the beginning, just have them playing on the weekend, but the teams will play on Saturday and again on Sunday. Our games should take between like 75 and 90 minutes to play. So if you attend one of our games, you get a double header basically in less time than it takes to finish one NFL game. And in the long run, when we have the women's league opening up in 25, the double headers will be a men's game and a women's game.
So very quickly, so the games will be played in the towns where, so it'll be in the town of their team?
Yes.
And so the other three teams will come and play.
So
is that how it works?
Imagine the first weekend, the four teams travel to Las Vegas. And in the first game, the Dallas team plays the Boston team. And then the second game, the Vegas team plays the fourth team. And then the next day, then say the Boston team would wait for the second game and play the Vegas team. And then the Dallas team would play the other in the first game. So you'll always get a double header, and you'd always have the home team on the back half of it.
Okay, I got you. And that was a different model than you guys had started with before.
Well, we just had people bringing their own team. So the model was a lot like kind of, it's almost like American Ninja Warrior meets, a pickup basketball tournament or something.
Okay.
So like the guys just kind of came on their own, and there's a lot of parts to the business. I mean, I know this is primarily a business station, so conversation. So the fact is, to make a business out of a sport, it's very hard to sell tickets when you come to a city and people don't know what they're getting. The traveling model for entertainment works when people are already very clear about what your product is, and they already know they want to see it when it gets to their town. So the easiest example is nobody's unclear about what you're going to get if you go to a Taylor Swift concert.
Correct.
So you wait for that opportunity when the circus comes to town to go buy your ticket and go experience it. And you think about things like bull riding or ice skating, or wrestling, boxing, all these things that are more sort of individually driven. They work as a traveling circus. You think about auto racing, in a lot of ways, very individually driven. It works as a traveling circus because you're rooting for an individual who's not necessarily representing a place, and you know what you're going to get. You're a fan of whatever they're doing, and so you're anxious for it to come to your town. When you have a team sport like this, I don't see how we can sort of sustain a sensible conversation with a potential ticket buyer when there's no home team, and when there's no expectation that if they like it, that they can come back. I mean, why test a product if you can't buy it again? And, if we don't stay in these cities and keep coming back to them, why would anybody come and try it the first time? There's no payoff if you can't keep buying it. And so, we've seen that our game works really well live. It works really well as media. And when people come to live games, they're going to have quite an experience because the intensity level of it is always a bit shocking. This is not powder puff. This is serious business, and these guys are playing hard.
So what time of year are you guys going to play?
So we're looking at the spring. We're looking at basically, February, March, April as our period, basically after the Super Bowl. That's the best time for us. It's the time where, we like juxtaposing our game against traditional football. Whereas like, the USFL, XFL, when you juxtapose them against the NFL, they look pretty terrible because they're just watered down versions of the same thing. But when you compare our game to the NFL, it just looks freer, faster, more athletic, more fun. So it compares well rather than sort of comparing poorly. So we're happy to sort of show up right after the NFL finishes.
All right, sir, I am not an expert, but I think
I
the
think you are,
women's
Mike.
flag
I think
football.
you are. I think you're more of an expert than you pretend not to
Well,
be.
I'm from Philly. We're sports experts, and we take a lot of L's. We do, but we keep coming back. I think the women's flag football is going to blow up.
I agree with you. Mike, I've been telling people, I have a few bets I've been making in the last couple of months where I tell people that the largest sport in the world for women by revenue in 10 years will be flag football in the world. Bigger than women's tennis, bigger than women's skiing, bigger than women's soccer. And here's the reason. Sports tend to sort of they sort of tend to find a market when in a country, the people who represent them can compete on a world level. And it's very hard to achieve that in most sports. Look at how hard it is for the US men to compete on a world level in soccer because we have the rest of the world has such a big head start. So the really cool thing about women's flag is really nobody has a head start. In the US, men, basically every boy and man in the whole US at some point in their lives has had a football in their hand and they're a potential player for us. So you can imagine that a US men's national team that's built properly would be pretty impossible to beat. But on the women's side, most of the women that have persevered and played flag that are on the national team today, who are great players, they grew up in a world where they were the only girl playing football. They had to play with boys. We did an amazing actual series of Instagram posts, #OnlyGirl on AFFL at Flag Football, when we had our women's games, where all these women told their story that the only way for them to get access to playing football was to play with boys. And it wasn't that great of an experience, I promise you, to be the only girl. And we now have this kind of crazy moment where not only in this country, but all over the world, women are realizing that they have a kind of a free run to play this game and that no one's going to sort of say, stay away, it's a boys' game, or we don't want to see you play this game, especially around the world. If a woman shows up wanting to play soccer in a soccer country or rugby in a rugby country or cricket in a cricket country, the men are like, women don't do sports, this is for us. And so in all those places where the men don't have really any sort of, hold on football, when the women start playing football, they make it their own. And the energy of this is crazy. We saw the Mexicans beat the US in the World Championships last summer. We saw the success of that commercial on the Super Bowl with the Mexican women's team player. And when we actually had a women's game nationally televised on CBS Sports, it actually doubled the ratings of the men's games that we had on. And frankly, it was not played at nearly as high a level as the men's games. So the desire is out there. I think the level is going to go up really quickly. We now have more than half the US population where high school girls varsity is available, with like New York and California coming online. Most of the big states now have it, and it's going to be everywhere. And, there's been some discussion in the press that the NFL is working in their sort of building of the international business of flag, that they've had conversations with the NCAA. And Mike, the day that your kid can go to Michigan and play against Ohio State, the day your kid could go to Florida and play against Georgia in a women's football game,
it's going to be big.
Is the day you take that little soccer ball away from little Janie and you give her a little football. You're going to see, at the 6-year-old, 8-year-old level, you're going to see football take off for girls like you can't even imagine. Once that path is there, once the path to, represent, on that kind of stage is there, soccer is going to be in for a rough ride.
I can imagine. Jeff Lewis here with American Flag Football. As a getaway question, so you're an insider. 5 years from now, will the USFL, the XFL still be standing?
No.
Wow. You took no time.
Well, Mike, they're bad ideas because you can't build media businesses out of second-tier professional sports.
Okay.
You can build live event businesses out of second-tier professional sports, but there has literally never been a successful mass media business for minor league anything. And that's a fact. And there's a reason, because we spend our time very carefully. We spend all of our resources carefully. If you look at why second tier minor league sports can be really effective event businesses, it's because they have a really nice value proposition compared to major league sports. They cost a quarter, a tenth as much, right? And they provide a more intimate experience, a more community kind of experience. So, I don't even know how the average person goes to a New York Giants game or a New York Yankees game these days, with what the tickets cost, what the concessions cost. It's insanity how insanely expensive it is. So the fact that you have this option to go to a second tier in terms of the level of play, but get in a lot of ways, a better experience, makes it really, really compelling as an opportunity to go to something. But we never pull up to the desk at night and say, I got to find this AA baseball game they're playing in Louisville and watch it. We're not going to invest our time in that, because it actually, when we take the choice between a major league piece of product or a minor league piece of product as media, there's no cost difference.
That's true.
I'm going to elect the minor league event because it costs me so much less than the major league event and gives me something that's a little different. But given that I can always sort of choose to spend my time on something major league, why on earth would I spend my time on something minor league? It just makes no sense. And what people think that Americans love football, and I talked to you, I think the last time, about my little, my recipe for a media property. In sports and entertainment, all media properties have three things. They never don't have all three. They have something at stake. They have some kind of connection to people who are playing, and they're the best in the world. And that's the third piece. The reason the NFL is so much more successful than the other leagues is not because they're playing football. There's nothing about football itself that's superior. The reason the NFL is superior is because the urgency, the meaning of the events is way more in football than it is in other sports. You have so many fewer games that each game is magnified. And there's so much more uncertainty in the NFL about who's going to come on the right side at any given Sunday in those events. So the NFL just crushes urgency in a way that other sports don't. That's why the NFL is the biggest thing. When it then adds on the incredible connective power of being the Packers or the Cowboys or the Giants, those brands are unbelievably powerful. And then you add on the fact that the people we just saw at the Combine are literally the best athletes on earth. Their combination of size and athleticism is unique. They crushed the recipe. But not every football game crushes the recipe. If it did, the audience for the MAC on Tuesday night would be the same as the audience for the SEC on Saturday. But it's not.
It's not.
We distinguish between the quality and the piece that you have to have in anything to be a mass media product is you have to have the highest quality. And the XFL, the USFL will never do that. The original USFL, Mike, had a really fascinating opportunity because the average salary in the NFL when the original USFL started was $80,000. That tripled in the 5 years that the USFL was competing with them. I don't know the number of how many Hall of Famers played in the USFL, Jim Kelly and Herschel Walker and Doug Flutie and all these amazing players that started in the USFL, that played in the USFL. And the reason was at that point, the NFL's pay rate was so low that you could actually have just as good of players in another league. But at this point, paying guys, $50,000, $100,000 a year to play tackle football. You talk about what I think is a very poor sort of business decision, sort of like it's a bad business decision to play in the Pro Bowl and, take the chance of getting hurt for that kind of money. Well, I think it's probably for most of these guys, unfortunately, a kind of a bad business decision to play minor league football. They're not making it to the NFL by playing in these leagues. It's one out of every team, maybe. It's just not really going to happen. So, it's nice to see yourself on TV, but, I'd protect my health, be worth more than what you're getting paid.
There you go. Jeff Lewis, American Flag Football. Sir, we'd like to thank you for coming on. How
You
can we
didn't ask me
find
what, you didn't
information?
ask me what we'll be doing in 5 years.
You already told me you're blowing up. And the one thing that really got me was the women's game, because I mean, like you said, I've seen clips of the girls playing. I had seen when you had it on a year or so ago. The energy on the girls' side was, I mean, the men's was there, but on the women's side, I think you guys were just gonna hit it out the park.
I agree. I agree. And you know,
So
there's a very cool co-ed version of this game too. And most sports either don't have the opportunity or miss the opportunity to put women and men on the court at the same time. A couple of years ago at Wimbledon, Serena Williams, I think, played with Andy Roddick as a team. And usually in tennis, the highest level players don't play mixed doubles. And I was riveted. The whole idea of like watching the best women player in the world try to like return the serve or hit a passing shot past one of the best men's players in the world is so freaking cool. And we just don't see that very often. And so you can imagine a version of our game where there's 2 or 3 women and, 4 or 5 guys on the field at the same time. And it works. It works really well.
and the games are 7-on-7.
Yep.
There you go. American Flag Football League. Jeff, I'd like to thank you for coming on the program. Stay in touch, sir. We're going to keep following you, and anything we can do, just let me know.
Thank you very much,
All
Mike.
right, take care. Have a good one.
You.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.